Y'all, it's Megan again for Made for Mermaids, and today I'm making more of the Gable boxer briefs, but this video I'm going to do the exposed elastic and solid center front. If you want to see one with the fly binding and the enclosed elastic option, which is right here, I'll go ahead and link that video below if you want to see these options sewn up. So we're going to do the same thing as the other video. Let's see, I'm trying to decide. I really want to use this cute camo elastic. So I think I'm going to do a solid black for the mane. A fold. So I love Gable because they're very quick to make, especially with the options I'm using here. So what I'm doing is I'm folding my fabric in half so I can cut my main piece out. Just making sure I have enough room here. And I'll go ahead and cut it the other way so you can see. I normally wouldn't hack my fabric this way, but just to go faster. Okay. So my stretch of my fabric is going this way. This is a selvage edge right there. Now when you're cutting out, just make sure your fabric is nice and flat. And I am doing the mid inseam this time. So I just cut a few slits in my pattern and then just folded that up. It's usually what I always do in my, well, almost all of our patterns. 99% of our patterns have a ton of options and cut lines. And I don't want to keep printing them. So I usually just fold my patterns up like that. Okay. Move that up a little bit. So there's 2 layers of the black fabric, and I have that main pattern piece on the fold, and now I'm just cutting around. There we go. Now when I get to the back center, I'm just gonna cut a little notch on the fold to mark the back center. Like that. That just makes it easier later. It's just one less step when I go to add on the waistband. Okay, so there's my main piece. Now for the center front, I think I'll use this gray. And since I'm doing the solid center front, I only need 1 piece. So this is not on the fold, it's just 1 piece. Again, you want the stretch going this way. I should have pressed this, but I'll press it after. Make sure it's nice and flat though. This piece, I really need to press that, that's bugging me. Okay, and now for the elastic. Now you can use any brief elastic, it doesn't really matter the width. If it's a taller elastic, it's going to be, or a wider elastic, it's going to go a little higher up, but you can get smaller elastics, like this one's a little bit smaller. And I usually get all my elastics at Joann's for the plain ones like this, the soft. Or you can get them online. Etsy has a ton, and actually Amazon has a ton too. And of course a lot of small shops. Okay, so I just put this on the fold along with my pattern piece. And I'm going to cut. There we go. So that's all you need. Your waistband, your one main piece on the fold, and then your center front. All right, I'm going to press that real quick because it was driving me crazy. And now we can start sewing. So you're just going to unfold your main piece, and you want the right side to be up. So I know this is black, but the right side of your fabric, if it has one, should be facing up. And then your centerpiece, again, the right side of your fabric is going to go to the right side of your center front to the right side of the main piece. And we're just going to clip the centerpiece all along this curve. I like to start at the top, place a clip, then move to the bottom, align the bottoms, place a clip, and then start pinning. Now this measurement is exactly the same, but because they're opposite curves, I always had to say this, it's going to feel like you have to ease it in a little bit. Just like that. Okay. You can see what it's going to look like there once it's sewn. So now I'm going to take this to my serger and I'm going to stitch this together with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Okay, now it's all stitched, and I actually pressed that seam to this main side and then went ahead and top stitched it. You don't have to do that, but I do like to do it with contrasting colors. I think it looks fun, or with a reverse cover stitch. So now we need to attach the center to the other side, to this curve. So you're going to fold this. Now make sure your boxers don't get twisted here. And we're going to do the same thing. We're going to start aligning the pieces at the top and bottom, and then ease them together. Just like that. Okay. Now we're going to stitch here together, again with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Then I'll press it to the main side and top stitch it just like I did on this other side. Okay, now the center's all stitched. Now I did take this to my iron. I don't know why that blanked, I'm so sorry, but I took it to my iron and I went ahead and did a memory press, which means I pressed the hemline the 1/2 inch so I don't have to do it later. And we're going to turn them inside out, and we're going to sew the inseam. So I like to, again, align the ends first. So I'm going to pin the ends together. If this black is a little hard for you to see, the other video I used a print, and these steps are all the same. So I'll link that below if you want to watch that one. So pin the edge, pin the center, and then just ease these in. Now these measurements should be the exact same if you took the 1/2 inch seam allowance and didn't have any wonky cutting, of course. If you need to stretch it a little bit, that's okay. Okay, so there's the inseam pinned, and I like to straighten it out when I stitch, and I'm going to take this to the serger and stitch these together with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Okay, the inseam's all stitched. Look like that. Now we're just going to set these aside while we work on our elastic. So what you're going to do is you're going to put your elastic, just fold it right sides together, and you're going to stitch it here with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Okay, now that it's stitched, you can either press it to one side or press it open like this and stitch again, just so these tails don't bug whoever's wearing it. It might be itchy. So I like to press it open like this and then just go back and stitch again. Now you want to make sure on both these seams that you're using a stretch stitch. This is a 3-step zigzag, which is my favorite for elastic. And I used white so you could see it there, hopefully. So now I'm going to go ahead and take it back to my machine, press it open, and stitch along each side. Okay, now I have my elastic stitched down, and then I went ahead and just trimmed any extra that was on the side. And now I'm going to go ahead and quarter the elastic. Now you have a couple of different options of how you want to stitch your elastic on. You can put it right sides together, which means it would be flipped, and put it around and match and stitch the elastic with a 1/4 inch seam allowance like this, and then flip it and top stitch it. Or let me get this quartered real quick. You can overlap your elastic on top of the boxers and stitch it that way, which is what I normally do. So that would look like this. You would overlap by a 1/2 inch. And to make this easier, if you're worried that you're going to get it off, you could mark your fabric with a chalk or a pen, marking pen, by a 1/2 inch, or you could even baste it at a 1/2 inch, and then you would have a line about exactly where to overlap it. Or what I like to do is I just eyeball it. I take it to my sewing machine, and normally you can stitch it either way. You can stitch from this side, so you would match the quarter points, which is actually easier if you're going to overlap to use pins here like this instead of the clips, because you can't really clip it together. You're just using it as a marking point. And you can take it to your machine and you can stitch this way to where the elastic's on the bottom, or you can stitch it with the elastic on top, and you'll kind of be looking and placing as you go. Either way, any of those ways will work. So you can stitch it with the right sides together and flip it up, or you can just overlap it. I'm going to just overlap it, and I'm actually going to take you to my machine and show you how I do this. Now, either way, any way you stitch this, you want to make sure that you're using a stretch stitch. So if you're just overlapping, it's way easier on a sewing machine than it is to use your cover stitch. So that's what I'm going to be using. You can use your cover stitch. It's just a little bit more tricky to handle the elastic and the boxers. I'm going to move you over to my sewing machine now. Okay, now that we're at the machine, so if you are using the clips, I like to put them on top since they're really just there to mark. So there, and you're going to slip the boxers inside. Now, if you stitch this way, you might have an easier time getting it exactly on a 1/2 inch without marking. If you marked your fabric, then it might be easier for you this way. It doesn't really matter. Either way, you're gonna be fine. It doesn't matter which way you stitch it on. I'm using a 3-step zigzag, which is my favorite for sewing elastic. So what I like to do is start right at the center back, and now I have that notch there so I don't have a pin. And I'm gonna start sewing just a little bit. And then after I have it sewn a little bit and the needle down, that's when I'm gonna start stretching my elastic to fit. And I'm just gonna match those quarter points. And you kind of have to go slow here. So again, I'm just eyeballing the 1/2 inch and then also using my foot as a guide. Okay. And when I'm holding the back with this hand on the other side, I'm not pulling the fabric, I'm just guiding it through a little bit to make it easier. Again, it would be easier here instead of using clips if I was gonna pin it, because then I'm not gonna have to keep going back and forth. So maybe I'll show you on the next quarter point with them pinned together. Okay, so this time, or for this quarter, I'm going to grab a pin. Just lining these up. And I'm going to place a pin right at that quarter point. Okay, for this next quarter point, I went ahead and I put a pin so you can see how this is easier. You do have to be careful if you're using the clips not to hit them with your foot. It'll break the clip, break the pin, and then I'm just making sure that this edge is nice and flat. And you'll see since the pin is holding the elastic, it makes it a little bit easier to actually sew it. Okay, here we go. It frees up my hands a little bit, so I'm not holding that in place. I'm going to stop before I get to that pin because one, I never sew over pins. It can break your needle, mess up your machine, so I never sew over pins. I know some people do, but I'm just going to move it to the next quarter point, like that. And then keep going. Again, just make sure this is flat. Stretch the waistband, make sure the raw edge is flat. So if you don't like the overlapping, again, you can put these right sides together. I'm going to go ahead and lose these so I don't hit them with my foot. You can put it right sides together, stitch with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and then flip and top stitch. If this is just a little bit too tricky or you don't like the way that it looks. Almost done here. Okay, all right, so the waistband is all stitched. You can look on the inside, and if you have any extra fabric past the seam, you can just trim it off. I don't think I do, I just caught it. And now the only thing left to do is to hem. So you'll press your hemline up a 1/2 inch, or if you did a memory press like me, you can maybe see the crease there. You'll just fold that up and hem it real quick. Okay, now it's all hemmed on the leg line and they're complete. Super cute and fast. I love these. They make perfect scrap busters or gifts. This is the long inseam. This one's the mid inseam. If you make some gables, we would love to see. Please post them in our Facebook group or tag us on Instagram. If you have any questions, you can leave them down below, or again, ask in our Facebook group. We would love to help. And I can't wait to see everything that you're sewing. Thanks. Bye.